I'm on my way up to another session in Davies, and I just put up the video I'd done last week, and I sent it to a few guys, and they all loved it. Actually, they were all saying how much they enjoyed listening to it. These guys are all involved in MMA, but though some of them weren't, and they just enjoyed hearing about the history and the sort of story of the days before Irish MMA became what it is today. But it's also given me an idea of like just doing these wee simple podcasts and like mini podcasts, just me chatting about my thoughts, which I do every day anyway. But it offers a chance to just speak about the way I see the world and an insight into how I became who I became. This world's narcissistic. This world has been presented with an opportunity to enhance our narcissism, because we're all men and women, so we've all got that narcissistic tendency within us all. It's just one of the laws of nature, and it's having that ability to recognise the narcissism within us all, and then deciding to either embrace it or control it. And I think too many of us embrace it. Too many of us are so traumatised, so angry with the world, and so insecure with our placement in the world that we feel the need to speak. We feel the need, and I put my hand up, I'm one of the worst, but we feel the need to be seen, because for so many years of our lives we felt we weren't. It's the curse of society today. We're all feeling this way. We all fear that we're not going to be seen as the man or woman we see ourselves as, and we're desperate to be validated in our own feelings. And this is why it brings me to MMA, because even though I went through hell through my fighting years, my fighting career, my early coaching career, I realised that the experience of martial arts, the men and women I was surrounded with in that time, they helped me forge a belief structure. Now, some of it was toxic, a lot of it was toxic, but the principles and the foundation of who I became was forged within the experiences of the gym in Davies. The environment you remain in will shape the foundation of who you become. It might be an unconscious thing, but you will usually find that the people you hang around with the most, you're the sum of those people. And in Davies, there was definitely just an underlying toughness within the fight team back in the day. Last week I spoke about how back in the early 2000s, when Irish MMA was just getting started, like the very early 2000s, 2000, 2001, social media had not even been invented. There was Bebo, no one was on Bebo. Social media just was not prevalent in that day society. So the ability to be narcissistic and to do things so that other people would start complimenting you and telling you how awesome you were, to make yourself feel better about yourself, it didn't exist. That just didn't exist. So the guys that were up in that gym, turning up twice a day, like lots and lots of years I was going up twice a day, 10 a.m. and then 6 p.m. and both sessions were the same regardless. If you went up to Davies twice in one day, you were doing 1,000 Hindu squats, 100 Hindu push-ups, 6 minutes neck bridging, and 45 minutes of body weight conditioning. That was just how it was. Then you were doing the sparring, and if you were doing pads and you were doing 5-minute rounds on pads going balls to the wall, you were doing that twice as well. There was no, well, first of all, there was no understanding of progressive training really in them days. We were learning, we were just teaching ourselves as we went along. We were just doing what we felt was right, even though most of it was wrong. And we had to learn the hard way. And in today's 2023, you're going to have all the strength and conditioning coaches will tell you that, their recovery rates are not right and They're going to cite all the science and they're going to tell you everything that you're doing wrong. And in some ways they're right. They are right that the body does need to recover. If you train hard, you need to recover harder. But back then, we weren't MMA athletes. We were fighters. We were training to fight. And the rule set was a lot less forgiving. The weight categories didn't really exist. And some sort of shape or form, in those days you were going to battle. It was more than just a sport. It was a way of life. And what that type of training did for you, and the MMA fighters today, very few of them understand this, because they have got such a science background in how they're training, because it is now a business, and it's all about keeping the zero, and it's all about the performance and the TV rights and all that stuff. There's a lot of money to be made, so you have to be more cautious. But back in my day, professional fighters were getting paid 50 quid or 100 quid. 50 quid if you lost, £100 if you won. Maybe the title fight got about 300 quid. So you were not doing it for the money, because you were training 16 weeks, 2 times a day, getting your balls kicked in, sacrificing, buying the food, going to sleep, working a job, working 2 jobs. You were doing it for the love of the sport. You were doing it for the love of you were doing it for the love of the experience. It was part of you. It was the very essence of your soul. And although it might have not been physically rewarding to have to do all that work and do all the training and pay for the food and all that stuff, and pay for your own training as well, by the way, but what it did do was it forged a mental attitude, an attitude that can only be found in that grind. And I do think regularly about this, and I liken it to how the warriors who used to fight to the death must have felt. And I don't mean that in the sense that we're warriors and we were fighting to death. It was, for them, a way of life. It wasn't about getting applauses from other people. It wasn't about getting the pats on the back and being told they were awesome. It was literally they were training because they knew that if they did train like that, if they didn't forge that mental strength to continue going when all is lost, that the chances are they would die. And it brings me back to Eddie Marin. Perfect example. I don't know if he won or not. I think he lost this fight. I think he did lose this fight and actually put him out for a number of years. But he was going for a knee bar. Don't quote me this, but I think it was a knee bar he was going for. And he got stuck in a bad position and the guy just pounded his face and it broke his orbital bone. But the thing about Eddie was, it goes back to that warrior mentality. Even in the depths of when he was getting his head pounded or all was lost, Eddie did have this mental attitude of, I'm going to win this fight. This next second is going to present me with the opportunity to finish this. And that was like Greg Locker, and that was Thomas Duffin, that was Davey. That was so many of them boys up in that gym. I am not in that category, 100% not. I openly admit that I was not the fighter, I am the coach. I just fought so I could understand what it's like for the fighters, because I always wanted to coach the fighters. I've got an innate ability to take in the patterns of movement and then teach them in a way that other people understand. That's my skill set, and I recognised that early on. And I always found that I had this passion for coaching the guys. That's saying, you know, those who can't do, those who can't teach. In a way, that is true. For me, it was anyway. I couldn't fight, wasn't a great fighter, didn't enjoy fighting. The nerves always got to me. But I loved the learning. I loved the experience of gaining new knowledge, and then through repetition and explaining to others, discovering ways of breaking it down. And for me, my skill set is being able to read the crowd I'm with, trying to get to understand the individuals in coaching. And are they kinetic? Are they auditorial? Are they visual learners? And trying to articulate a way of getting them to understand what it is, the information I'm trying to pass on to them. That's my buzz, that's what I get. I enjoy the grappling, I enjoy hitting in the ground, Don't enjoy getting hit as much, but I enjoy all that stuff. But I don't like stand-up. I hate stand-up. Stand-up hurts. But when you consider, like, the warriors of yesteryear, they had to fight to the death. Or when they went out onto the battlefield, they knew that their role there was to kill. It wasn't to give any grace. No quarter asked, no quarter given. So for them, the training they did and the methods they used had to be sharp, short, effective. And for me as a coach, I try to look at what's effective, what has stood the test of time. Because the thing about science is, the thing about the training methods we've got today, it's science-based. But science is about showing what is, but science changes every week. What was scientific evidence 6 years ago has been disproven with a new theory, or a new bit of proof, or a new method, or a better way of doing it through exploration. That's the scientific, that's the analytical mind. But fighting is more than science. Fighting is an art. Fighting is a way of life. And for a lot of guys, a lot of fighters, if they would stop being obsessed with the Instagram influencers and their latest scientific data on the best ways to train, and instead go back to what has stood the test of time, they would probably find what truly works. For example, in training, bodyweight training has been going around for generations, thousands of years. Since the day humanity existed, we have trained with our bodies. We walk, we climb, we roll, we tumble. So that is something that every fighter, in my opinion, should have in their repertoire. They should be comfortable climbing because it's going to build muscles, it's going to build grip strength, it's going to build coordination with the body. They should be comfortable walking because walking is great for burning fat, it's great for the lungs, it's great for the head. They should be great at running because running is going to increase your cardio. It's going to put you into places where it's very easy to give up. Like, all you have to do is stop. But it's discovering that reason why you shouldn't stop is the key to success in this place. Because when you run and you decide to go at a pace that's more uncomfortable than you used to, or a distance that's usually further than you used to, or hills, or maybe it's an environment that's going to be more uncomfortable than you used to, what you're going to be brought to is a place where your mind is going to say, your ego is going to tell you, stop, this is not good, this is bad, we're going to die. Because the ego, the neurological system, doesn't have this rational thought pattern. It just understands what's familiar, what's comfortable, and it's going to get you to do whatever it can to stay in that place. So now you're in a position where the man understands that they're not going to die by doing this run. It's just out of their comfort zone. So the conversation now goes one or two ways. You either stop or you don't. And the story you start telling yourself changes into the story you want and need to hear in order to keep you going an extra step. And when you get to that place, when you get to that point, it starts forging a different mindset. And that mindset comes into play in those dark moments when you're alone in the cage, you're getting your head pounded off you, and the easiest way out is the tap. It can all end at that moment. But instead, you find a way of taking that pain, processing it, dealing with it, and figuring out a path to keep yourself pushing forward. Because in a fight, it can change in a moment. It's that ebb and flow of battle. I used to love that when I was cornered guys. And you know, part of me would love to go back to cornering guys with the mindset and the knowledge and the experience and the knowledge I have now. Because the psychology that I've studied and the process that I've went through, I've got a much deeper understanding of that, and I can apply that to the experience these guys are going through because I've been there. But I used to love watching the battles, because if your fighter was, you could see when your fighter was winning, or you could see when your fighter was losing. There was one fight I remember, I think it was my big friend Cormac Copeland, and he was doing well, and he was coming forward. And remember, body language, communication is something like, I can't really remember, 64% body language, 23% tonality, and only 7% are the words we use. Don't quote me those figures, but something like that. But I remember Cormac was going forward, and your man hit him an unmerciful right cross, and it was heavy, it was a hard shot. And I remember Cormac taking a back step, and something within me, the gut, the coach in me knew that the fight was over at that point. Cormac had lost the fight. And even when he got through that round, I think he finished the fight actually, but he got through the round, and I was in the corner and I was telling him, you know, get yourself forward, slip, flop. But I could see it in his eyes. It was over for him at that point. And you know something, that's also something the fighter need to learn about and understand. That lesson is a gift if you understand how to digest it as a lesson and not internalise it as a failure. In the moment, it exposes your very soul. It exposes who you are. It shows you who you currently are. Not who you have to remain, but who you currently are at that specific moment in time. How you react to that shot, how you react to that overload or that overpowering experience. And if you can go away and just digest that, if you take the loss and you experience the loss, and like we all experience losses, that's part of fighting. Fighting, you will lose. But if you can somehow find a way of sitting with that loss, sitting with the emotions of that loss, and logically and emotionally digest and dissect what it was happened, where the moment was, what you were thinking, how you reacted, how you did differently, figure out a way to overcome it, then that loss is one of the greatest lessons you'll ever have, because that loss will have taught you who you are as a man and how to become a greater version of yourself. And as a fighter, that's your goal. Too many fighters get focused on the ego, focused on wanting to win. And with social media, it's a cancer. Because I seen this. This is when I started to fall out of love with MMA. When the Facebook shit started to happen, I started to fall out of love with it. When the promoters started giving amateur fighter ticket deals, I started to just fall out of love with the fight, because it wasn't congruent with my ethos as a martial artist. I'm old school. I believe that when you're in the cage, you're doing so as a way to test yourself, as a way to discover who you are and tap into an unknown resource within yourself that can make you a better man. But when you get 16-year-olds and they're mentally masturbating over Conor McGregor and his attitude, and I get why Conor does it, he's a businessman and he's a very successful businessman, regardless of what you think of him. I'm not too fond of himself and the way he presents himself. For the majority, sometimes he does. There's times like that Nate Diaz loss where he just stood up and he just was totally brutally honest. If that Conor McGregor could be more often, fuck, he could influence so many young kids. But unfortunately, when he's landing there with a broken leg and he's screaming at a Victor that his wife slipped in his DMs, that just lets himself down. But that's in the moment, and that's the moment you've got to go and look at. That was a lesson for Conor as well, you know. He goes away because he's in the motion, and he shouldn't have been interviewed. It was wrong to be interviewed at that moment in time when you're like that with a broken leg. And his soul has been laid bare, and he's been exposed to the world. That's massive, millions and millions of people. His ego takes a bruising and it's hard. So I don't disrespect him for that. I disrespect the action, but the man I don't disrespect because he just dealt with that moment at that time, and I'm sure he regrets that afterwards. But there's that conflict, that bipolar personality almost in the fighter, who you actually are, and the representation of who you must be to get the crowd behind you and make the money. It's a hard balance to find, and not many people manage it. George St. Pierre done it very well. But I see these young men, they've never had a fight before, they're about to have their first amateur fight, and they're filling a professional card, or what should be a professional card, but these promoters are filling these cards with amateur fighters that don't have to pay, so they're taking all the money themselves to pay for like the 3 professional fights, and then they're making a killing, and they're offering the kids a ticket deal, and these kids are all promoting themselves, and then they find out who their opponent is, and then they start slamming their opponent on Facebook. They've never met them, and they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and then their friends jump in, and that 16-year-old testosterone insecurity kicks into social media, and it just magnifies everything that's wrong with MMA currently. And then these kids get into the cage and they're fighting in front of 1,000 men. These kids should be fighting behind closed doors with only their coaches and teammates, because you're already nervous, you're already terrified, you're already shitting yourself, and the realization of what is about to happen or what could happen be so overwhelming for these kids who could be amazing gym fighters. that they just freeze and get their balls kicked in. And then what happens is they've climbed such a high ladder of fucking boasting and ego that the fall is so far that they never turn up again. That's their career over. And those kids could have been the next McGregor had they been controlled more and offered more guidance and offered the opportunity to tiptoe into the world of MMA. And because of the greed of the promoters and the need to get bums on seats to make money, it's at the detriment of these kids. I'm really against that. And that's why I started falling out of love with MMA for so many years. And then you've also got the other side, the kids who win. And now, because he's won an amateur fight against a kid who's only been training 3 months and 6 months himself, his mates are hoisting him up his shoulders, and the way 16, 17, 18-year-old wee lads do. And they're getting digged up and I'm knocking their bollocks in and all this shit. And that inflates that kid's ego even more. And then eventually that kid, he's going to meet someone who's going to beat the shit out of him. And then that kid's fall from grace. And the reason this is happening, in my opinion, is because the martial art ethos has been removed from MMA. It's no longer mixed martial arts, it's a business. It's a sport. It's a way for other people to make money from two guys having a violent encounter. That's what it is. Promoters hijack other guys' balls to step in the cage and leave it all there to make money for themselves, and the fighters get a token. Here, thank you. There's a couple of quid for you. Very, 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 very few fighters have successful careers, but the promoters seem to make good money from it, and that's exploitation in my opinion as well. Now, I get it. It wouldn't happen without the promoters, but it certainly wouldn't happen without the fighters. Fighters are the main draw, not the promoters. I know promoters think to themselves, like, I know UFC's a brand, Bellator's a brand, and all these local brands. The promoter has an emotional attachment to that. It's their baby, and they think that their baby's the best baby, but it's not. It's the fighters that make the shows. And the fighters should be recognised for that, and they should be paid and compensated fairly for what they do. But that's the problem now, because people are doing it for that and not for that. And when you do it for that, you're easily bought and sold. Your heart isn't in it. And if your heart isn't in it, then it's easy to tap out. You're no longer doing it for you. You're doing it for coin. You're doing it for exposure. And that leads down a path that just, I don't know, doesn't sit well with me. Now, of course, there's going to be people that disagree with me, because there are people making lots of money from it. And there are young men who are insecure and need the cage for validation for themselves. And they're unconsciously, they're not aware of what I'm saying. Probably resonates more truthfully with them than not. And if you're attacking me for saying this, you feel yourself wound up. Probably there's a reason why, and it's not the words I'm saying, it's how you're digesting these words. But that's why I loved MMA in the early days, because it was about the fighting, it was about the individual, it was about betting yourself, it was about the camaraderie, the teamwork, the experience. You know you love a sport if you have to pay for your flights over, you have to pay for your hotels, you have to pay for your diesel, you have to pay for the fight. Do you know, look at Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The average man in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu isn't doing it for money, they're paying for it. They're paying, I seen the other day, 70 quid for a kid to enter a competition. If you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now and you're competing, you've got a taste of what MMA was like back in the day for those fighters who were doing it then. Except it's safer, and you're not having to take punches, elbows, knees and kicks, you know. But you've got a taste of what that was like. You did it for the love of the sport. You did it because your teammates are doing it, and you have a bond with the badge you have on your gi. I've got the Progressive Combat Club logo over my heart. I done that purposely because that logo, what it represents, has allowed me, has aided me to become the man I am today. And that's why I honour it. And that's, whether you think that's crazy or not is irrelevant. It's, some people will appreciate that and understand that. Other people think it's nuts. But for me, it's made me the man I am today, or it's helped make me the man I am today. It's allowed me to express myself and become the man I am today. And it's done so with challenges and put me in positions where I have to overcome shit that I don't want to acknowledge. And for me, that's the essence of martial arts. That's what's missing in today's MMA. The realization of fighters that while the zero does mean a lot to you, and while it's important for you to be successful and become that guy, and all the trappings that can come with a really successful career, ultimately your career is going to end. But the man you are will only end with your death. And the lessons you can take from these experiences could stay with you for the rest of your life. And when you realise that and you understand that, it's different. It changes things completely.